I want that. I want that. I want that. So I'm Willy Wonka in the chocolate factory. I'm going in, going, woo, let's go to the bubble gum room. Let's go to the chocolate room. And these guys I think they're definitely having as much fun as I was. So
After all the dreaming and gear shopping, Mike's van is finally headed into the hands of the pros. Today, the actual build process kicks off. Stay tuned and find out what happens next.
hey, there we go.
Welcome back to Mike's Van Build Podcast. If you've been following the series, you know we've covered how Mike chose his van, picked out his gear with an epic shopping spree, and mapped out a vision for life on the road with his next van build. I'm Jerem from Van Life Outfitters, and today is a big milestone. Mike just dropped the van off at the Site 7 shop, where a team of pro builders are getting to work. Today, we're talking about the handoff, the plan, and what it's like to watch the dream finally come to life. If you're enjoying the series, like and subscribe and stick with us. This journey is just getting started. Let's drop in on that conversation I had with Mike earlier. Hey, Mike, thanks for joining us again. Let's get to it.
Excited. Thanks, Jerem.
Remind us quickly, what made you decide to go with a professional builder instead of a DIY project on this? Because that's a question a lot of people ask up front.
I just didn't want to devote my time and energy of every minute of every day, or at least after my other job was done, building a van.
Yeah, because you're a carpenter, right?
Yeah. No, I built houses in Colorado with a couple guys for 10 years. So I think, and my dad was an electrician. So I feel like I could have done it. I just wasn't interested in it. There's certain things that I'll go work in my yard, but after I go work in my yard, I go put my bike in the back of the car and I go to a trailhead and bike. So I just didn't want to commit the time and energy to building a van. I wanted it to be done for me. I wanted it to be a surprise. And then I just want to be able to enjoy it.
Well, I think that's great. And thanks again for bringing us along the ride. It's a lot of fun to hear about it. So, the first thing you had to do, I assume, is get the van there, in our last episode, you had a shopping spree. How did you get everything to Site 7?
Well, it's kind of an interesting story because at the time I was selling a home in Florida, selling Willow, my other van in Florida, buying a house in Greenville, buying a van in Knoxville, Tennessee.
So it was just kind of
it was just another busy day. So I got to Greenville, and the day I closed on my house, I loaded up the car, and my wife and I drove 3 hours, 4 hours to Knoxville, where I picked up the van.
The day?
In the same day we closed on the house at 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock, we needed to be to Knoxville before 7. So we're boogieing over there. And of course the roads were kind of funky from the previous storm that had closed some roads. So we get to Knoxville and pick up the van. We drive it straight back. We get to the house, and sure enough, that weekend I had to drive back down to Florida, which was 10 hours, for the Peace, Love, and Vans Festival. So I figured, well, while I'm down in Florida, what items they didn't pallet up and ship to Site 7, I would throw in the back of the van, drive it home. Once I got home, I'd spend the night here, and then Amy and I would drive over to Site 7 in Chattanooga, which is about 3.5 hours. I think I had my awning in the back, some water tanks, the heater, the water pumps, a number of different items that I just told the guys, just keep in the warehouse. And when I'm down for the festival, I'll pick them up and drive up. So Amy and I head out one night. We get a hotel about a half an hour away from Site 7 because I said, yeah, we'll meet you guys there at 8 in the morning, and I'll drop the van off. So that's how it happened. There's this crazy whirlwind of house selling, van selling, house buying, van buying, festivals and vans.
Would you say that it's common among van lifers to not only want to fit as much stuff as possible into a van, but also into their lives?
Yeah, I'm usually not that hectic, but this is what needed to be done. And of course, the beauty of actually bringing my van down as an empty shell to Peace, Love, and Vans is I got to look around at, all these other vans, even though I had some pretty good ideas of what I wanted to do. And it was kind of funny for people to open my van door and see a mattress on the floor and a bike. And they're like, oh, your van isn't even done yet. I said, oh, no, no, no. But you wait and see. Next year, when I come back for Peace, Love, and Vans, this baby will be done. But to be able to walk around and sort of reaffirm some of the ideas I had already dreamed up, to see them in other people's vans or to see things similar was a big help, no doubt.
Nice. For our audience who may or may not know, Peace, Love, and Vans is a fantastic festival that has been in the Florida, Tampa area for a few years and will
Yep.
be again next year. They're also expanding into Colorado next year. So we're excited
Yeah.
to participate in both events. Okay, so you,
I happen to be one of the co-producers of that event, so I'm super excited to not only be able to go and set it all up, but to be able to show off my own new van.
and I've seen Mike in action, and he's running around with his head cut off that entire weekend. Okay, so you got everything up there. How does it feel? Like you've done all this prep, all this work, research, shopping. How does it
Yeah.
feel to hand the van off?
Well, it's kind of interesting because when I drove my van from Colorado to San Diego, the first van, Willow, and dropped it off at Ridgeline Vans, I kind of went down an alley and came in the back door to a warehouse, and they opened it up. And these guys were cabinet makers primarily. So I didn't really get that sort of van vibe. I was like, okay, there was another van there. But when I pulled into Site 7, you know, it's their own building. It's got this great sign out front. It's painted this funky color green. There's like 5 sprinters in the parking lot. I was like, yeah, this is getting real. I'm actually really excited about it. Hey, van friends. This is Mike from Van Life Outfitters. Well, today's the day. I'm finally here at Site 7. Site 7 is Tennessee's premier van conversion camper company. And today I'm going to drop off my brand new 2024 Sprinter all-wheel drive. So come on in. So here we are. This is where the magic's going to happen. It just really felt like I was, dropping it off into real good hands because this is what these guys do, So
Nice.
yeah, it's fun.
So, tell us a little bit more about their shop. So it sounds like it's quite an experience.
Yeah. Well, again, a beautiful sign outdoors, but you open the front door, and of course, there's vans in all different stages of build. They've got another beautiful sign against the wall. There's a lot of exposed hardwood, and I noticed off to the right there was a seated area with some swag on the shelves, hats and t-shirts and stuff. And of course, they're playing some great music. There's sort of some newgrass music going on in the background, and
You didn't get your next van's name from the music
no,
they were
no,
playing that
no,
day?
I didn't. But I was just like, I got to start opening doors and looking in these vans, and so it really felt like I had stepped into a real the real deal, kind of thing. To see some books on the table about old RVs, because again, Justin's grandfather opened an RV shop in Chattanooga years and years ago.
Right.
So that was kind of cool just to see the history and to see some, little model vans on shelves. I was like, yeah, this is kind of fun. And then a few minutes later, in comes this dog named Birdie, which is like some sort of bird dog. And Justin shows up, and Hunter and Jammer, the other guys in the shop, and hey man, we're psyched to see you. And I was like, yeah. I said, you see the van? Like, oh, we love the color. We love the color. So, yeah, I'm psyched about it. I was like, I said, you guys are up for it, right? And they're like, yeah, we're down for it. Let's get started. And so I said, well, here's the first thing I had to do. Here's my keys.
So were they up for it or were they down for it? I got confused there for a second.
Up and down. They were ready for it.
They're all over the place.
They were both up and down for the drive. Yeah. So I said, well, I suppose I got to give you the keys to start with. And they said, oh, we got time for that. We got a few hours. We want to show you around the shop. Let's sit down and just make sure we're all on the same page because, this was somewhat of a unique build for Site 7 in that I was providing, based on our previous little podcast, most of the the inner workings of the van as well as the van. I had done my shopping spree, and so it's a little different that he wanted to make sure that everything that I brought was accounted for and all that kind of stuff. He's like, well, let's just do a tour of the shop first. And
Take us on a tour. Tell us
yeah,
about it.
so after being in this sort of like open, like a showroom at a car dealership with 3 or 4 vans, he says, well, come on in this way. And I go into this other room and there's these CAD machines and wood and sawdust. And, I was like, oh man. He goes, yeah, well, we cut all our own cabinetry, all our own wood here and there. I was like, that's pretty cool. It kind of made me think of Ridgeline. Then he says, well, come here in the back. And so I go through a hallway into another giant kind of warehouse. There's, 3 or 4 more vans. And he goes, here, have a look at this one here. And this gorgeous blue Sprinter 170. He says, this build is the biggest build we've ever done.
Ooh.
And I opened the door and looked in. I was like, oh, my goodness. This was like someone's kind of tailgate and party mobile who clearly had probably more money and brains than I did because it was gorgeous. And he said, and I was like looking at the cabinetry, he goes, well, come around the back. And behind that, there's another whole section of the shop, which is the metal shop, the welding room, where they're, putting together this cabinetry and welding it and sanding it down so it's buttery smooth. And, none of it was finished. It was just, sort of straight metal. And he says, then we send it out to the powder coater and let us show you what it looks like when it comes back from the powder coater. And by the way, here's our custom gray water tank, which was this beautiful metal tank. And at the time, my plan was just to put a 7-gallon plastic jug under my sink. And he goes, here, let me show you where we put it on this van. And he took me over to another van. I was like, I want one of those. And he's like, well, we could do that for you. And I said, is it going to be that much? He goes, oh, we'll work it out. I said, yeah, dude, sign me up for one of those gray water tanks. So, and then he showed me one of their custom roof racks. So it was just incredibly impressive, not to take away from the guy in his garage who's putting together 2x4s and plywood, but this was totally just kind of next level. So I felt really secure in knowing that these guys are the real deal. This is going to be done professionally. The attention to detail, even the cleanliness of their shop was impressive. Everything was shelved. All the stuff that was shipped to them was on a shelf with my name on it, and I was like, okay, I'm feeling better all the time now. So yeah, and then we came out of there, then we go upstairs to the fabric room where they've got, swaths of fabric rolled up. And like when you go into a carpet shop and I'm like, oh, geez, how am I going to choose all these? And Amy's looking at them because she's with me. And they're like, well, there you go. Do you want a drink? Do you need the bathroom? I said, well, yeah, I'll take both of those. So we go back downstairs. And he said, yeah, do that. And then we'll go have a seat and let's talk some more. So yeah, it was pretty darn exciting to think that these guys, and meanwhile, there's work going on all around me. They're not just, wasting time talking to me. 3 other guys, or one guy's doing some sort of suspension upgrade. Another guy's doing something else. And so, yeah, it was definitely a cool scene.
So this podcast, obviously, we're not intending to make it an advertisement for Site 7, but you chose them, and today is the drop-off day. So we're going to hear a lot about Site 7.
Yeah.
Obviously, there are a lot of builders out there.
Yeah.
You chose Site 7 for a bunch of reasons you've mentioned. What are reasons that that new van builders or a new van customer would choose somebody else? What are other types of van builders that might be out there as well?
Well, just, everyone has their own personal idea of what looks nice and what feels nice in terms of texture and fabrics and style. I really dug Site 7 style. But I still see other van companies go, oh, that's really nice. What kind of cabinet shape do you want? There's a van company out there called Nuvo, and they've got rounded edges on their cabinets. I mean,
they
it's
look
gorgeous,
beautiful.
and in white marble or quartz countertops and stuff. Then there's some other company, and it's a lot of tongue and groove and pine and cedar everywhere. You feel like you're in a sauna, So I think it really comes down to what vibe are you looking for? What feel do you want in your van?
Yeah.
And I know for myself, when I was at the festival and first stepped into Site Seven's van, I was like, this feels really good to me. The other thing to consider is, what's their skill level? Can they do the electrical? Can they do the plumbing? Or are they going to sub that out to somebody else? How intricate will your build be? And as I said, I think probably in one of the first episodes is, do your due diligence and, get some references. Because working at Van Life Outfitters, I've definitely had some calls where I had this builder do a van and, oh, geez, this is falling apart and I don't know how to do this. And, they didn't do this very well. And I was like, well, did you call any of the other customers? They're like, no. I was like, oh, well, yeah, that might have helped. So, yeah, I would think just number one, go to Peace, Love, and Vans. Go to a festival and look at lots of different vans.
Mm.
Is there a particular style you're looking for? Do you want rustic? Do you want modern? Do you want industrial? Do you want cheap plastic? It's all out there. And I would never take away from any builder because everyone's doing the best they can do. And somebody's going to like somebody else's stuff. I happen to like Site 7. I liked Ridgeline Vans when I first got that van, but then driving it, using it, I changed my mind. And again, I had the luxury to do that. Not everyone has the luxury to do that. Although I think Josh of Van Life Up, he's done like 15 vans. So it might take a couple vans. It's like buying a house. You might like the French farmhouse this month, but next year you want the modern cement metal penthouse kind of thing. So I would say, it's a real personal preference. And there are definitely builders out there that can build just about anything that you might sort of envision yourself cruising around in.
So it sounds like a huge part of this is aesthetics, just the style of the different builders. But you also mentioned their capabilities
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
quality. One thing you mentioned was get references, so get customers
Sure.
and talk to them.
Yeah.
You mentioned quality. How would you evaluate a builder's quality of workmanship?
Well, I would look at their electrical system first and see if it's a spaghetti mess or it's tastefully done and labeled and put together, because that's one of the areas that
Mm.
I think in the RV world, there's a lot of fails because they just slap stuff in a cabinet and you open the cabinet and it looks like a bowl of ramen or something because there's wires everywhere. So to me, I think if the person takes pride in their wiring, in their electrical systems, that would be an indication that some of the other parts are going to be equally as nice. Uh, Plumbing, how do they lay things out? Are they, manufacturing their own tanks for gray water? Are they, setting things sensibly in the van? And again, a van's only so big. You can only do so much in a van in terms of creatively placing the sink over here or the toilet or some cabinets up there. So with a limited space, you're only going to, and again, there's the beauty of going to a festival is there are some creative people out there. I've seen a couple of vans like, wow, he's got his bike like this in the shower with turf on the floor and a hatchet hanging over here. It's like, okay, that works. It was a cool idea. So and then just open and close drawers, open and close cabinets. That's going to be a good sign how good the craftsmanship is. Look at the floor, that kind of stuff. So, it's again, it's like buying a house. I mean, you could have someone do a pre-purchase inspection if you wanted to, but I think if you go to a builder and you talk to 4 of their customers and they're happy, then I would think they're doing it. They're doing something right. You know.
That's great. I think that could be a lot of help to people who are at the beginning of their journey and they're trying to figure it out. In fact, I think it would make sense for us to put together a questionnaire, like
Sure.
for people to use. Here are the
Yeah.
questions you want. Here are the things you want to look at. I love what you talked about with the bowl of spaghetti.
Yeah. How many vans have you built? Oh, we're on our second van. Well, maybe wait until they've done 5 vans,
Yeah,
or the people who have done 50 vans. Hey, there's something going on that's right there, you
yeah.
know. So yeah.
Great, thank you. You mentioned the gray water tank and how you changed your mind there. Were there any other changes you made the day you dropped off the van because of things you learned when you were at the shop?
Yeah, fortunately they were willing to sort of hear some things that weren't ideal for me in Willow. And one of those things was just the spacing as I entered the van. And most people are just doing simple square cabinets. And they said, well, we've got an interesting idea because you had mentioned that when we talked on the phone. So cabinet design, the bed, I said I wanted an additional bench. And they're like, well, we've got this cool idea where we could actually flip the bed up and you could have an additional bench seat underneath it. Um, so yeah, I think they were equally as inspired by my excitement and my ideas as I was about their ability to do these things. So there was this kind of mutual collaboration and excitement, which is another great thing you want to find with a company. You want to vibe with them. You want to feel like they understand what you're trying to do when you're creating this van. So, and of course then, choosing fabrics. They had their favorite tweed that they put on vans. I wanted something different. Of course, my initial choice wasn't available. So I was like, oh no, now I've got to. So we're out holding it up against the color of my van and holding it up next to other vans, seeing how dark it's going to make the van. Is it going to be bright enough? And I had already seen their cabinet work. I'd seen their maple ceilings. They were showing me how they do their lights, where you have a dimmer in half the van and the other van has its own separate lights. You had floor lighting. None of that stuff I had in the previous van. So that was all pretty exciting. Then I was like, wow, I can turn just half the lights on. I got lights in my little windows. I said I want more USB ports because on my first van, it was only in the front. So you needed an 8-foot cord. Right next to my bed pillow, I've got a place to put my phone in. It's like, and to have them show me this stuff in their vans that they had already done was like, yeah, that I want that, I want that, I want that. So I'm Willy Wonka in the chocolate factory. I'm going in, going, woo, let's go to the bubblegum room, let's go to the chocolate room. and these guys were, I think they're definitely having as much fun as I was. So
It sounds like such a great day.
yeah, yeah.
Speaking of design, that's actually our next episode. So for those who are listening or watching here, in episode 4, we're going to talk about designing the van. So make sure you hit like and subscribe to be ready for that. Now it's time for our lessons learned section. Obviously, we talked about a lot of things you've learned along the way, but let's summarize. What have you learned about dealing with a professional builder, and especially what would you do differently in that early phase of preparing and dropping off the van?
Uh, Again, the first van I did, I just saw a picture of one van and I went for it. And I dropped it off and I said, I just let me know when it's done. And with all the changes I had sort of created in my mind from the minute I drove Willow, I wanted to make sure that going into this, I was really clear as to I wanted a more spacious layout. I wanted multiple textures and fabrics, whether it's wood and steel and tweed, the lawn seal flooring. I wanted, just a more industrial, heavy wearing type materials and fabrics. I needed a more spacious feel. Willow was gorgeous, but I felt a little confined. Yeah. So there was just, again, rent a van or go out in a van and you decide or see a van, what you may or may not like. So I learned that, as I said in episode 1, I needed to do more research. I needed to see more examples of what could be done in a van. And fortunately for me, I found a company that could do those things, and they would take my suggestions. I would give them artistic license based on some structure that I had in my own mind. So finding a builder that will, is not just set in, this is the only way we do it. We have this size cabinet, this size bed, this is where the water goes, this is where electrical goes. I wouldn't want to go with a company like that. I would want to go with a company that says, we've got a variety of different offerings, and we can actually create some variations on those themes to meet your needs,
That's fantastic. Well, I can't wait to dive deeper as the build progresses. Thank you so much for your time
Yeah.
today. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jerem. See you next time.
Fantastic. Thank you for listening to episode 3 of Mike's Van Build podcast. We put up a bunch of photos, links, and product info from this episode on our website, vanlifeoutfitters.com/podcast. And make sure to subscribe, tell a friend, and stay tuned for more van build stories. I'm Jerem from Van Life Outfitters. We'll see you next time.